There is a woman in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, who is 73 years old. She raised 8 children, spent 40 years working outdoors in all seasons, never owned a bottle of SPF moisturizer, never stepped inside a Sephora, and when you look at her face, you see something that stops you cold. Not perfection, but density, structure, the kind of skin that looks like it still has its architecture intact, like the scaffolding never fell. She spends less than $5 a month on her skin. She has done it the same way since she was a young woman, the way her mother did, the way her grandmother did before that. When asked what she uses, she does not have a brand name to give you. She has ingredients, plain ones, the kind that cost almost nothing and take up no shelf space. That is what this channel is about. Not trends, not the next serum with a French name. What has actually worked, quietly and without marketing, for generations of women who never needed the industry's permission to age well. If you have been here before, you already know what we do. If you are new, I hope you stay. The methods I share on this channel are inspired by traditional practices of old order Amish communities in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and Holmes County, Ohio. These are communities that have maintained largely unchanged daily routines for over 2 centuries. They do not adopt new products. They do not respond to advertising. And the women in these communities age in a way that if you spend any time there, genuinely makes you stop and ask questions. So let me tell you what the questions led to. The Amish skin system, the one used consistently across multiple communities, is not a single product. It is a sequence. And that sequence costs in most American grocery stores somewhere between $3 and $6 total. The base of it is rendered beef fat, which you probably know as tallow. And the moment I say that, I know exactly what some of you are thinking. You are thinking that sounds like something from 100 years ago. And that is exactly the point. Tallow has been used as a skin preparation since at least Roman times. It appears in European household records going back centuries as the standard base for anything applied to the face for moisture or healing. It was used by frontier women across the American Midwest. It was standard in farmstead communities throughout Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. And then, at a fairly precise moment in American commercial history, it disappeared from mainstream use. Not because something better replaced it, because something more profitable did. Here is where the timeline gets specific, and you deserve to know the real sequence of events. In 1911, Procter & Gamble introduced Crisco, partially hydrogenated vegetable shortening, primarily as a cheaper cooking fat. The technology to process vegetable oils into semi-solid form at scale had just become viable. The same industrial logic that applied to food very quickly extended to cosmetics manufacturing. Petroleum-derived and vegetable oil-derived emollients were cheaper to source, more shelf-stable, and easier to standardize than animal-derived fats. By the 1930s, the personal care industry had largely shifted its base ingredients away from tallow and lard toward mineral oil, petroleum jelly, and refined vegetable oils. In 1938, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act gave the FDA authority over cosmetic safety claims for the first time. This sounds like consumer protection, and in some ways it was. But it also created a regulatory and legal architecture that required documentation, standardization, and eventually clinical language to support product claims. Tallow, being a centuries-old folk ingredient with no patent value and no corporate owner, generated no research investment. No company was going to spend money proving that something anyone could render at home worked well because there was no way to profit from that proof. The research simply never happened in the way it happened for newer, patentable ingredients. The industry did not bury tallow. It did something more effective. It ignored it. By the 1970s, mineral oil was the dominant moisturizing base in almost every mass-market product. Vaseline-based formulations were standard. Lanolin was still around but declining. And the framing had shifted completely. Petroleum-derived meant laboratory-derived, which meant modern, which meant better. The old animal fats were coded as primitive, unscientific, something grandmothers used before we knew better. The Amish women kept using them anyway. Because for them, the question was never what the advertising said. The question was, does it work? Tallow from grass-fed cattle is high in conjugated linoleic acid, oleic acid, palmitic acid, and stearic acid. Those are fatty acids. And here is why that matters. Human sebum, the oil your own skin produces naturally, contains those same fatty acids in very similar proportions. The composition of tallow is closer to the composition of what your skin already makes than almost any plant oil on the market. That is not a marketing claim. That is organic chemistry. Your skin does not recognize a ceramide serum as self. It does recognize something structurally similar to what it already produces. This matters more after 50 than it did at 30. After menopause, sebum production drops significantly. The skin's natural oil barrier becomes thinner and less efficient. Transepidermal water loss increases, meaning the skin loses moisture to the air faster than it can retain it. This is why skin that felt fine at 40 can feel papery and tight a decade later. The barrier is compromised. And the most logical way to support a barrier is to give it something that matches what it is built from. The Amish system does not stop at tallow. The second element is raw apple cider vinegar, diluted, not the pasteurized kind from the salad dressing shelf, the kind with what they call the mother still in it, the cloudy sediment that tells you the fermentation process was real and not filtered out for aesthetics. Apple cider vinegar has a pH of roughly 2 to 3. The skin's natural surface pH is slightly acidic, typically around 4 to 5. After 50, that surface acidity tends to drift upward toward neutral, which disrupts the acid mantle. The acid mantle is the thin film on the surface of the skin that protects it from bacteria and environmental damage. A compromised acid mantle means more sensitivity, more redness, slower healing, and a surface that is more vulnerable to everything. Amish women in these communities have used diluted apple cider vinegar as a toner for generations. Not daily necessarily, but regularly. A few drops in water, applied with a cloth. That is the whole method. It is not complicated. It does not require a 12-step routine. Now, I want to be clear about something, because honest information is the only kind worth your time. This approach does not reverse advanced sun damage. The hyperpigmentation from decades of UV exposure, the deeper lines that are already there, those are structural changes in the dermis, and no topical fat-based preparation is going to undo them. What tallow and apple cider vinegar can do is improve the barrier function, support moisture retention, and potentially slow the rate of new damage by keeping the protective surface of the skin intact. Prevention and support, not reversal. If you go in expecting to look 25 in 8 weeks, that is not what this is. If you go in expecting your skin to feel less tight, more comfortable, and over time visibly plumper in the way that comes from hydration rather than filler, that is a reasonable expectation. You will not see results in a week. 6 to 8 weeks of consistent use is the honest timeline. Think about the contrast. The average American woman over 50 spends somewhere between $150 and $300 a year on facial moisturizers and anti-aging creams, according to industry research data. The global anti-aging market was valued at over $60 billion in 2021 and has grown substantially since then. Most of that revenue comes from repeat purchases, because the products require constant buying to maintain whatever effect they have. A jar of quality grass-fed tallow, which you can find from small farms or online, typically costs between $8 and $15 and lasts 3 to 4 months. Apple cider vinegar with the mother costs $3 to $5 for a bottle that will last considerably longer. The math is not subtle, but the money is not even the most important part. The most important part is that the Amish women who use these methods are not using them because they are cheap. They are using them because they work, and because their mothers told them they worked, and those mothers told their mothers the same. That is an intergenerational proof of concept that no clinical trial has the time horizon to replicate. I want to come back to that woman in Lancaster for a moment. She told me, through her granddaughter who translated some of the conversation, that she had never thought of her skin as something to fight. She did not talk about aging as a battle. She talked about it the way she talked about the seasons or the soil, something you work with, something you feed, something that responds to care but not to panic. There is something in that framing that I think is worth sitting with for a second, especially for those of us who have been marketed to since we were teenagers with the message that our faces are problems to be solved. They are not. They are skin. They need fat. They need a healthy surface pH. They need to not be stripped by surfactants that were designed for industrial degreasing and ended up in your face wash. The Amish women in these communities do not use foaming cleansers full of sodium lauryl sulfate. They do not use alcohol-heavy toners. They do not alternate between drying treatments and occlusive repair creams in the compensatory cycle that the industry, perhaps not entirely by accident, designed its product lines around. They clean gently, they restore the barrier, they leave the skin alone to do what skin evolved to do. The simplicity is not primitive, it is precise. There is one more element to the system worth mentioning, and it is the one that connects most directly to the structural aging questions, the ones about firmness and elasticity. Internally, Amish women in farming communities consume bone broth regularly, homemade from the same animals that provide the tallow. Bone broth is a source of collagen precursors, glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline, the amino acids your body uses to build and maintain the collagen matrix in your dermis. The research on dietary collagen precursors and skin elasticity is not conclusive at the level of a randomized controlled trial, but the mechanistic pathway is not speculative. Your body needs raw materials to produce collagen. It cannot synthesize it from nothing. Whether you are getting those materials from a $12 supplement powder or from a pot of bones simmered for 12 hours on a wood stove, the chemistry is the same. The difference is that one of those things costs almost nothing and has been part of the same community's diets for 200 years. What you are looking at when you look at the skin of an older Amish woman in Lancaster County is not good genetics in isolation. It is what happens when someone consistently does a few simple things right, without interruption, without being distracted by the next thing the industry invented to solve a problem the industry helped create. You do not have to be Amish to apply this. You do not have to live on a farm. You have to be willing to step off the product carousel long enough to ask whether the very expensive things you have been buying have actually done what was promised. Most of the women watching this already know the answer. That is probably why you are here. Drop your state in the comments and tell me what you spend on anti-aging products every month. I want to know. Not to judge, to get a real picture of what this industry extracts from us annually. And if your grandmother used something her mother used before her, something she never bought in a store, I genuinely want to hear about it. Those threads of knowledge matter. Some of them are the realest information we have. If you are the kind of woman who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. Next time, the Amish hair preparation the FDA tried to classify as drug grade in 1978 and why they failed. The reason is a story that tells you more about who actually controls what you put on your body than anything a label has ever said.